Dave, it is Duncan, back from Metal Epidemic for another album review. And for this review, Duncan and I have been checking out the album from atmospheric rock duo Sisters. The band's new album, Leecheater, will be released on August 25th via Spartan Records. Okay, so...
This is Sparta! I feel like we can do that because that movie 300 clearly had a Scotsman who was supposed to be Greek. So I feel we can get away with that, Dave. I feel we can pull it off, Fridge. Anyway,
Gerard,
it's a joke no one gets. Gerard Butler.
What an accent. No stranger to the post-punk world, Jason Blackmore and his band Molly Maguire dominated the early 90s and were considered to be among the early pioneers of the post-punk Kansas City music scene. Frequently pushing boundaries of what was possible in terms of rock music, Blackmore and Molly Maguire helped to inspire a generation of bands who would go on to become torchbearers themselves. Similarly, Mario Quintero's lead-up to Sisters was equally as prolific. His other primary and still active project, Spotlights, formed in Brooklyn in 2013 and is often described as a mix of shoegaze, doom metal and post-rock. Around 2008, I wrote a handful of Molly Maguire-esque tunes and hit up Mario to see if he would be down to record them for the hell of it at his San Diego-based studio. He was into it and Sisters was born. Fast forward, the world shuts down. We then hit the pandemic in 2020. We decided to pick 5 of our favourite jams and divvy up the lyrics and vocal duties, Blackmore continues. Then Mario mixed and mastered the songs and we self-released the Make It Hurt EP. After it was released, we immediately agreed that we should make a full-length record. Recording is always fun, fulfilling and therapeutic, and our chemistry is undeniable. Produced at Quintero's home studio in Pittsburgh, the majority of Leecheater was recorded live over the course of 2 sessions. Recording has become much easier as I get older, says Blackmore. I used to get stressed out and uncomfortable because I wanted everything to be perfect, and I had everything pretty much musically orchestrated and mapped out in my head going into a studio. But Mario is a genius. He is a natural. He has the technical side of recording down, which I do not. So it's the definition of teamwork. I bring in the songs and he knows exactly how to get the right sounds. When you're recording with one of your best friends in his home studio, it's effortless, stressless, and magical. So, we played Born Again on one of our podcasts, one of the singles. It's the opening track from the album. And I was kind of instantly intrigued as soon as I heard that track. I think it was Bandcamp I heard it first. I could hear like certain sounds and influences that maybe wouldn't normally grab me like this did, but I also knew in the back of my head I was thinking this is going to appeal to another man I know. So it was a bit of a no-brainer to review this one. I'm interested to hear what you thought about this, because this album didn't quite go exactly how I thought it was going to go. What did you think? What did you make of Leecheater?
It's interesting because I love getting the context from the press statement, which, just going to say up front, I never read the press statement. To me, I'm the blind man in all these, and that I walk in, Dave tells me stuff, answers some questions. Spotlights is a band that you recommended to me a couple of months ago, and Alchemy for the Dead, which is their new album, has been on heavy rotation for me this year. I fucking love it. So the fact that we have essentially the drummer from that band, like, pulling his drumming duties over here and doing something which is very unlike Spotlight, which is kind of cool, makes me quite happy. So yeah, Born Again was a track we played, like you mentioned. We swung it into the podcast recording. In the podcast, it seems like it's seamless. Like Dave presses a button or I press a button and everyone on the podcast listens to the track. Not true. Let's peek behind the curtain, and what happens is we literally hit stop and then we hit record and then continue on. Dave's the only one that's heard the track. He curates the singles, but there's usually a good reason why Dave's picked certain songs around there, because there is almost a kind of dare we review, or also at times like that we're definitely reviewing, because I say dare we review, ultimately Dave picks what we review. I get no say in any of it. I liked it. I felt there was a kind of, it reminded me a little bit of what would happen if a band like Royal Thunder like shagged Queens of the Stone Age and birthed a mastodon. That's kind of what it sounded like, and I mean that in the best possible way. I like, the reason I say like a band like Royal Thunder is because a duo, and you told me about that at the time, so I knew there was only 2 musicians, and that's the end thing just now. Every band should just have 2 people. Every podcast should just have 2 people, unless they have a guest called Ross, because he's checking this out, obviously. But the like, I liked what I heard. I thought there was a kind of cool, kind of sludgy, doomy, kind of rocky, almost a little bit kind of desert rocky sort of element going on there. Big soaring melody vocals, loved it. Give me some of that. You are right, Dave. This album does not, I would say it doesn't play it safe. And it's all the better for not doing it. Because this album starts, almost feels like it was written in 2 different time periods. I'd be super curious to find out if that's the case. Because the front half of the album is relatively brief. Like, if you go tracks 1 through 4, you're not even half the run length of this. In fact, you're probably closer to about a third of the run length. And then the final 4 tracks comprise the essentially 2/3 of the album. It's where they get much more experimental. They get much more, at times, psychedelic. And they really push a kind of more proggy vibe out in a way that I really gravitated towards. At their core, they are very desert rock. Is what I kept coming back to. They reminded me like that there's a Queens of the Stone Age thing going on here, in a really, really cool way. And that they don't sound like Queens of the Stone Age, but they utilize a lot of riffing techniques, a lot of kind of distortion effects, in a way where like the bass suddenly becomes super prominent and really punchy, or the drums themselves kind of kick into just like a good old fashioned, like, you know, 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2, and the riff just follows on with it. And it's got energy and vibrancy. Where I think the band elevate things, and where I get really excited, is where those sounds get a bit more experimental. And like, if you look at the album artwork, it has this kind of esoteric sort of woo sort of vibe, right? Don't know what I was trying for there, but I'm sticking with it. Woo! It has this kind of weird. It has a kind of a vibe about it that feels like there's something under the surface. And if you listen to the first couple of tracks, that's not evident. It's when you get later on into it, specifically by the time you get to tracks like the Wick Effect, which is the first one where it's like that. Right, we're going long form, and there's movements to this. It's not like verse, chorus, verse, chorus. We're going to start experimenting with some sounds and some vibes. I actually think that's where they're at their strongest. And weirdly, as much as I love the back half of this album, what I would be inclined to do is pepper the tracks a bit smarter overall. As an album vibe, this kind of does feel like it's front-loaded with everything we would release as a single, and back-loaded with everything that we kind of want the people that are not just here for the singles, like people that want to buy a t-shirt, maybe come to the gigs, this is for them. I would have that a bit better organised. I would shift between longer tracks into shorter tracks a bit quicker than they do. Like, to give you context here, track 5 is 5.5 minutes. Track 6 is almost 7.5 minutes. Track 7 is 5.25 minutes. Track 8, the closing track, which we'll just put to the side because it's the title track, is 8.75 minutes. If you juxtapose that with the start, 2 minutes 40, 3 minutes 30, 1 minute 45, 4 minutes 30, there is a distinct shift in the back half of the album where it gets much more experimental, much more ambitious. I would say much more interesting, like overall. I find myself in the back 4 tracks really getting lost in their sound and kind of wishing there was more of it, or if the band had just committed more to that sound and put the singles in between those. Like all great duos, you get a sense of energy, and that's a big thing. I've yet to find the duo And I'm going like all the duos that I can think of, even going back to something like the White Stripes, there's always a sense of punch and energy. They overcompensate for the fact that they're down at least one member in the band. And I love that about them, and it's evident here. But it's not a case of we feel like we're like overcompensating the guitars, because there's not like they don't approach it like that. They're still filling out the Sims in the best possible way. I found some of the trippier elements like an absolute fucking hoot to listen to, and I think the production on this one, handled clearly in-house, is perfect. Like, this is one of those ones where like they hit the brief. They've not done anything too much on one side or not. Some of the subtler, quieter moments, the bits where they actually bring in Sims in the background just to elevate things, perfectly mixed and mastered. It just sounds great. I love the closing track in this one, Leecheater, which in itself is a fucking incredible name for an album and for a track, is the one where I felt like I got the full personality of the band, like the full sound, like everything that Sisters encapsulates is on that track, right? It's all the sludginess, it's all the doominess, it's all the kind of desert rock stuff, it's all the melody, it's all the proggy stuff, and it's long form out there that almost, I would say to anyone who was kind of hesitant, listen to Leecheater, and if there's like any massive element in that you don't like, chances are that you're not going to love the album. But if you love this track, you're going to love the album, because it's segments of that. My only gripe, and you knew there was an M coming here and a but, my only gripe on this one is that I don't necessarily think, not that I want bands to be unique, but I don't necessarily think there's anything about Sisters overall that necessarily makes them stand hugely ahead of a lot of other bands that are doing this stuff. It's elite level for sure. They're operating at a high level. Knowing at least where one of the band members comes from, I never listened to the 90s kind of post-punk outfit they mentioned there. It doesn't sound anything like Spotlights, and that's a good thing, because that wouldn't really work here. But I kind of feel like they're missing maybe a trick there, and some of that punkier element that you mentioned, or some of that more kind of shoegazy element that I think might just change the sound enough to make them stand out a bit more. Notwithstanding that, though, it's a great listen. It's about 40 minutes in length. I would change the ordering of the tracks. That's just me. I think that once you get past track 4, it feels like the album like slips into a slower gear, and then it's just kind of happy to glide that out. And whilst I love all the songs, I feel like some of the energy from the front half of the album could be smartly positioned in between. It's produced really well. It's executed really well. Love the vocals on it. Love the guitar work on it. Love the production on it. Yeah, I'm in a mixed state. I like, after hearing Born Again, I didn't want a whole album of Born Again, and it didn't give me that. And there's so much stuff in here where I'm like, that is a concept and a song I fucking love. But in the context of the album, I find the placement of tracks confusing a little bit.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's full of personality. It's full of excellent songwriting. I don't know. I feel like I'm damning it with faint praise. I like this album quite a bit. I really, really, really do. I've had it for the best part of about 2 months. So I've listened to it loads. This has like easily been listened to over 10 times. And that's maybe why I'm being hypercritical of it. Whereas all the other albums get about 2-3 listens and then I kind of shoot from the hip. This one's been with me for months now. So I kind of felt like I've leaned in a bit more to that. But I'm the big gripe for me is I'm confused why the album starts for the first half with relatively short, concise songs, and then the back half of this album is elongated, and not as a technique on 1 or 2 songs, it's on every song. That it almost feels like the first half was written at one time and then the back half was written post something else, where they kind of changed their songs and like, we can't lose these songs and we don't want to release EPs. See if this was 2 EPs. That might solve my minor issues.
Interesting.
Dave. What did you make of Sisters?
I think maybe I like this better than you, which is kind of blowing my mind a little bit because I thought it might be the other way around. Here's what kind of reminded me of.
What did it remind you of?
Our Man in the Bronze Age. Because they did something similar where they released a track from the album which was super short, catchy, single length, grabbed
Queens of the Stone Age sounding.
Yes, yeah. And then we listened to the album, we're like, what? Like, that's not what I was expecting here. And I kind of feel like Sisters have done a similar thing, where the first single really hooks you in, but actually the album has way more sides from this band to offer. I kind of went into this thinking it was going to be a fairly groovy, sludgy stoner kind of riff machine with hooky vocals, and to a certain extent you still get that on a good chunk of this release. There are grooves, there are big fuzzy riffs and choruses that will kind of drill into your head, and it sounds fucking ace. Like that. I want to state up front, the production on this is mahogany, Duncan. It is warm, it is organic, it is, the instruments have really natural tones. It's been captured super well, and you've got the essence of two guys just in a room locked into a groove and just churning out really good riffs.
This is recorded. I can't stress that enough. I think it's on Black Stars when I had the good headphones on, and I could hear on the opening riff. I was like, I can hear that snare going. Like there was a rattle every time it was played out, and I was like, yeah. So this is two guys in a room.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the first part of that album serves up that nicely. You got from Born Again into Dead to the World. Yes, there is the Queens of the Stone Age thing is going to be there. You'll notice it. I'm not a massive fan of Queens of the Stone Age, to be honest, but
you're wrong. But we forgive you for it.
But I enjoyed this. There is a little bit of Our Man in the Bronze Age in here as well, but it's very tight, very driven, gutsy, kind of stoner desert rock. Great harmonies, fairly conventional arrangements for the first part of the album, and around kind of round typical length, a couple wee bit shorter, but really catchy stuff. Even Black Stars, even though it's quite a bit shorter, and it starts to show a wee bit more kind of noise rock lane, even a wee bit grunge in there as well. It wasn't my favourite track to begin with, but the chorus absolutely won me around. It's got a fucking awesome chorus on it. After that track, things start to diversify a little bit. Through the cracks, it still has drive to it, and it still comes with a vocal melody that gets stuck in your head, but it definitely adds in more atmospheric qualities in some of the riffs and the lead work. And this kind of was more reminiscent of a band like Failure, even Shiner as well, that have a much more kind of spacious kind of feel to them. And I was like, oh right, okay, this is not what I was expecting. And I went back and I listened to the previous EP after I heard this album. And they did experiment a little with that on the last track of the previous EP, where they kind of started to lean into that. But with this album, they've started to lean into it a lot more, which can make sense. It's a full-length album, so they've got the kind of runtime where they can kind of expand on things and experiment a little bit more. That shift, though, totally comes on track 5, which is the Wick Effect, where things do get more experimental, both stylistically and compositionally as well. You've got a load of like back and forth between that kind of light and shade. It has atmosphere in sections. There's a kind of warm kind of organ sound sitting in the background, and then there's these kind of really crushingly heavy parts dropping in and out, which is like a mix of like noise rock and sludge rock. Vocally, that track, there's areas of that track that are visceral, like showing a completely different side of their sound and taking the mood of the album in a much darker direction. It doesn't have the big vocal hooks of some of the previous tracks, but I really like the shift in tone on that track, and the kind of array of vocal tones and textures made it a track that really kind of stood out to me. You've also got Windows, which is the second longest track on the album, even more expansive, with almost a kind of post-rocky type build-up into the middle of the track, where they again let out that heavier side, a bit more doomy in pace, again less conventional, not a track with a big hook leading chorus, but it shows something with a bit more patience, pushing a more kind of somber mood, showing another side to their personality. And there's some really cool, like ominous sounds happening in the background that really add to that mood. It also pairs really well with the Wick Effect as the kind of middle piece of the album. The album then gives you Feet on the Ground, which goes back to a more verse chorus type arrangement, but it's got a little bit more of a kind of psychedelic feel in places. So you get a more kind of trippy, slightly more peaceful vocal, which I really enjoyed. And I think that added a nice kind of contrast to the track, where they finish it off with a really kind of gritty, bass heavy groove. And I think it was around that track where I was like, holy shit, the amount of vocal tones that we've had on this album is ridiculous.
Very diverse.
It's like an all-you-can-eat of buffet of vocals. It's just like very impressive performances. There's two of them are doing vocals on this, Jason and Mario, and I think they bring a huge amount of diversity to the table on the vocal front. The album closer, Leecheater, is not what you'd expect with a track title like that. Firstly, obviously, it is like it's creeping on like 9 minutes long. Has a little bit of a Team Sleep vibe in the vocals on this one, and in the clean guitars. But it does open up to something heavier, again with a real heavy dose of atmosphere and the riffs and the lead work. I found it really immersive. I found myself kind of getting lost in that track, in a similar way to Windows, which, with the length, both of those tracks sound like they could have been album closers, just the way they kind of bring them to a conclusion. But even at 9 minutes, I didn't feel like it overstayed its welcome. I felt like it was a really kind of fitting way to finish the album.
It has a kind of, it reminded me a lot of Chrome Ghost.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah,
closing track that way where it builds it just feels really comfortable with its length. Like it's just like it's super confident. Tracks at 9 minutes should never feel confident. They should always feel like the band's like, should we drop something? No.
Yeah.
Play the riff again. Like, do we want to like just do it again?
Yeah.
It kind of that way where it just has that kind of that pace that just keeps going, and just this sense of like, because if you chop away the introduction, like the build up and the outro of that, it's a 5 minute track.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it's so confident to build it up and close out the way it does that I feel like that confidence goes through to the listen. You feel like you're in safe hands all the way through it.
I really enjoyed this, and every time I went back to it, I enjoyed it a little bit more. I actually didn't have an issue with the running order of the tracks either. I didn't see it coming. Like I thought, like when I was like 3 tracks in, I was like, okay, this is cool. I've got an idea of what we're getting on this album, and then track 4 starts to slightly change. Then track 5, there's a kind of huge shift, and then that last part of the album just kind of expands out, and they start to show all these different sides. But I kind of enjoyed it. I liked the kind of the flow of the album. I think if you mixed these tracks up, it wouldn't have had the same effect. I think if you went short, catchy, and into long, I don't think you would have got the same effect with the album.
I think you'd have to rewrite some of the tracks.
Yeah, I think so.
I think it's possible. And like I say, I don't have anything against the tracks themselves individually. I just feel like there's a clear. It's almost like an A-side, B-side to me. There just feels like there's a clear shift.
Yeah, I do. But I feel it's blended as well, though. I think there's a moment where they both start to cross over.
Yeah. I don't think it doesn't work as well for me as it works for you.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
Yeah. No, I found that the ordering worked really well. I thought the transition from those kind of short, fuzzy, catchy tracks into the more expansive stuff, I thought it really worked, and it gave me something I wasn't expecting. I also thought the chemistry between the two members was incredible. Like you can feel that they've been working together for a number of years. So the whole album sounds super tight, probably more locked in with each other than even from the last release. And it's, as I said, it's produced immaculately. It's got that sonic punch when it needs it, but it also handles the more nuanced parts of the album in such a way that it's
got
still
depth, man.
Yeah, it still hits you hard, even though it's not heavy. It's an album that gives you way more than it says on the tin. If you've heard Born Again, which was the kind of lead single, then just try not to go in expecting a full album of that. As I said, there are a handful of short, fuzzy rock tracks that are really catchy. But then there's this other side to the band where they really showcase a much more broad set of sounds and textures. And I felt like I just kind of sat back and just got to kind of bathe in that like huge atmosphere and mood. Initially, I thought I was like, I could do an album of Born Agains, but then actually the combination of kind of diversity they gave me was much more fascinating to listen to. And I wanted to go back to it. Like, if they gave me a whole album of Born Agains, I don't think I'd go back to it as much. But there's something here that keeps kind of dragging me back in that's really interesting. Good. It's a kind of really good mix of both worlds, because you are getting those catchy tracks, but there's also another side to it, which is really cool. So what do we think scoring for the new album from Sisters? What are you going to score Leecheater?
To me, like I said before, I think the back half of the album is like more in tune with what I wanted from the band, which is weird because my introduction to the band was a track that doesn't sound much like that. But like tracks 5 through 8 are my jam. They're my tempo. They're my pace. They're my level of experimentation. I found them really rewarding. I find that juxtaposed against the first 4 songs is a bit jarring. To me, those kind of feel like a long way to get to a really interesting point, even though the tracks are short. To me, it doesn't flow as well as it flows for you.
Right.
That being said, though, I think everything else about it is great. So I would give this a 4 out of 5. Like it's an album I'll come back to. I don't know when I come back to if I'll listen to it in its entirety or if I will end up just listening to that back half more. But yeah, there's something here. Like I like them. There's something here about the sound, the style. I mean, if they decided to release a new album in 2 years' time, which was 5 songs and 50 minutes in length, I would listen to that with ease. I'd be very, very excited about that. It's not to say that they can't handle short form songs. They do, because those tracks are the ones that got us interested in doing it. I just think those tracks are not indicative of where I like the band at its best. The band at its best is when they are really spacey, really leaning into all the techniques that they're clearly more than proficient to deliver. So yeah, it's a 4 from me.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. Because I don't know. I'm with you. I really liked. I thought the back half was actually better than the front half, even though I really liked those songs as well. Yeah. But had they released one of those long songs as a single, I don't know if I'd been as excited to go in on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's weird.
Like we wouldn't have played it on the podcast if it was 8 minutes long, and we wouldn't be reviewing the album. So I get the hook. Yeah. I get we need to do. I get the thing from a band's point of view of we need to do something that's a bit more concise, a bit more to the point, that shows what we can do, that gets them in the door, and then we introduce them to our sound. I get that as a technique. I think the album takes a bit long. It's a bit late in the day to do that for me. Whereas I totally see what you're saying. You felt like by track 4, they'd set the table up and you were ready to sit down and have the meal. To me, it kind of felt like I was sitting down and they were still cleaning the table. Someone was coming out and putting the plate down. That's the difference. It's almost, to me, it's almost too much of a jump between the first half and the last half. Okay. So I'm curious, what score are you giving it though? What number, Dave?
I'm going 4.5 on this one.
Boom! There we are.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Than me. So
weird. Yeah, I really enjoyed this, and I found, as I said, when I came back to it on the second and third listen, I started to enjoy it even more and kind of appreciate the kind of levels to this and the way they've kind of pieced this all together. I found it worked for me. I thought the production was excellent. The fact it's just
fucking great.
2 guys behind this as well is kind of crazy. And again, even though these guys have been through, various bands and, had a big kind of background in their career, they're still quite early on with this band, but I'm really interested to see where they're going to go next with this, because there's so many options on the table as to what they actually do on that next release. So yeah, thoroughly enjoyed it. I would highly recommend checking this out. I don't know where to start with it though. Like, I don't know what track I'd recommend people to check out. It's a bit of a strange one to kind of recommend.
Yeah. Like Dave's feeling about the next album should be similar to his dick, longer and weirder. So I'm saying that anecdotally. I don't know. It's what I've heard in the rumor mill.
Yeah. That is the new album from Sisters. They are doing it for themselves, and that is the new album. Leecheater.
You did not. You've been sitting on that this whole review. I will say, if you are the band and you have made it right to the very end, are you named after the Brian De Palma film by any chance? From the 70s. And if you've not seen it, watch it and then write an album about it, because I would listen to that. It's very weird.
Leecheater is out on August 25th on Spartan Records.
This is Sparta! Big boot to the chest.
Spartan. Facebook links.
Sparta!
Pre-order below. Check it out. Let us know what you think. Happy to hear your thoughts and opinions on it. That is the review. Thank you for checking it out. We'll be back with another review very soon, but until then, take care. Speak to you soon.
Bye, everyone.